Story 1. Our company flew in a group of people from all over the country for a trade show. None of us had met before, but after having dinner together, everyone was friendly except one man, whom we will call Gary. Gary was an older man, maybe 50 or 60, but he constantly talked about how his mother controlled his behavior and how he wasn't allowed to do certain things because she said so. Instead of leaving his suitcase in his hotel room, he brought it to the restaurant, opened it at the table, and pulled out a large bag of chocolate chip cookies and half a gallon of milk. He didn't order anything at this nice steakhouse and simply ate 39 cookies for dinner. Our company shared hotel rooms, and we were comfortable with Gary's roommate. While hanging out in their room, Gary started acting strange and secretive. He eventually told us that he smoked but insisted no one could find out, especially his mother. We assumed he meant marijuana, but he pulled out hand-rolled cigarettes containing regular tobacco. One thing stood out more than any of this odd behavior. At about 4 a.m., I heard a knock on our hotel door. It was Gary's roommate asking if he could sleep in our room. We agreed and asked why. He explained that Gary got up around 2 a.m., turned on the hotel lights, showered, ironed his clothes, got fully ready, and then left the room. Gary returned around 3:30 a.m. with what we suspected were 2 escorts. He turned on all the lights again, played music and TV, and tried to seduce the women on his bed. His roommate, trying to sleep just feet away, endured this for 30 minutes before coming to our room. The next day, within 10 minutes, the story had spread rapidly. Management found out and fired him on the spot. He was genuinely confused, insisting he hadn't done anything wrong. The company arranged a flight home for him. Apparently, he was arrested at the airport after getting into a fight with security because they wouldn't let him bring an entire pizza through baggage check. He was a truly unusual person whom I think about once a year and wonder what he is doing now. Story 2. The hands-down winner for me would be this one junior engineer I worked with about 20 to 25 years ago. Let's just call him Junior. Junior had been on the job about 6 months when management decided he should travel to a client site on the other side of the country to see how they used our product and get specifications from them for a custom job. According to the senior coworker who was saddled with him, Junior showed up to the airport with only his wallet containing identification and a bus pass for the last city he had lived in, and a plane ticket. No cash, no credit cards, and no clothes for a 4-day trip. The senior guy claimed he thought maybe there was a checked bag he somehow never saw, but I think he just wanted to see where this was going. The hotel was acceptable. It was on the corporate account. The car was okay, though since Junior showed up with no insurance card, only the senior guy could drive. Food was adequate. Junior balked at only being able to eat at the hotel or when the senior guy wanted to break for a meal. But the clothing situation still makes me laugh. Junior seriously thought he could borrow the senior guy's clothes. That would have been ridiculous on its own, but Junior was an absolute beanpole, while the senior guy was of entirely average height and build. Junior ended up wearing the same clothes the whole trip. Junior didn't last long after that. Story 3. I am a surgeon. At one hospital, we had a surgical technician named Angela who I was sure had absence seizures. She would routinely stare off into the distance during cases, and you would have to ask for something several times while snapping your fingers. This happened 3 or 4 times every hour. She wasn't having seizures. She was just that vacant. We performed a quick surgery to replace a battery device. It involved making an incision, removing the battery, connecting the new battery, ensuring it was working, and then closing up. We made the incision and disconnected the battery. Then I handed it to Angela. Took a moment to stop some bleeding and then asked for the new battery. I connected it and we checked, but it was not working. While troubleshooting, I realized she had wiped off the old battery and handed it back to me. She had apparently done this to other surgeons. The operating room refused to dismiss her because she was super pleasant, never caused a fuss, and was always on time, despite being incompetent. She was never blamed. We called it a system error. A new policy was put in place where the circulating nurse had to verify that the old battery was handed off before inserting the new one, and surgeons had to specifically request the new battery that has not previously been in the patient. She also could not count, which is critical for a surgical technician. Sutures often come in packs of 8, so most techs count needles by counting packs. 8, 16, 24, 32, and so on. We could not get Angela to count by eights. It was literally 8, 15, 22. When corrected, she said 8, 16, 32. Another policy was implemented requiring counts to be done by ones. Even then, Angela would mess it up. She appeared to have some number dyslexia. Whenever she reached 34, she would inevitably say 43. It became routine in the operating room that once she reached the 30s, everyone stopped what they were doing to ensure she counted correctly. She did win Employee of the Week once. She came in to work on a day she was not scheduled. We were particularly busy, and it was helpful to have an extra body. It turned out she was supposed to be on vacation that day and had simply forgotten. Story 4. I did a brief stint in construction working for my father-in-law. We hired a new guy, supposedly a qualified welder. I'm an information technology professional with no experience in construction at all. I'm basically there to do easy fabrication tasks and fetch and carry for the competent workers. I'm supposed to be this guy's helper. Day 1, he's late for work. Some guy kept tailgating me. I thought he wanted to race. Then he turned his lights and sirens on. I almost got arrested for fleeing. Day 2, we go to the site. He needs to cut some metal. They had just laid down brand new flooring. I told him, hey, we should probably not cut right here. We're going to damage that floor. He told me to shut up. He damaged the brand new flooring, got into a huge verbal fight with my father-in-law, and was fired on the spot. About 3 years later, he's rehired. My father-in-law invites him to the house for dinner. I say, whoa, this guy looks familiar. Isn't that the guy you fired? Father-in-law says, well, everyone deserves a second chance. The following day, he complains about a woman he met. It's my sister-in-law. Fired again. He gets rehired after profusely apologizing. Father-in-law is a big believer in second chances. He ends up working for several months after that before tripping over his dog while carrying a pan of boiling water and ending up in the hospital for several weeks. He called my father-in-law first asking what to do. Father-in-law told him to call emergency services. Not him. No idea what happened to him after that. I know he came back to work for a while. I should ask my father-in-law how he's doing. Story 5. Back in my tree planting days, we had a week break between contracts. My crew headed to Slave Lake to camp and do some mushrooms. We ended up bringing a guy who had been ditched by his crew, and we soon found out why. The first morning, my crew boss dropped us at Tim Hortons and told us to get breakfast. This guy sprinted 3 blocks to a liquor store and came back struggling with multiple cases of beer. He just drank beer for the first day until we forced him to have dinner with us. He lectured me on how carbohydrates kill and how we should all just switch to beer. He then wandered to the campsite across from us and bought a blue crystal-like substance. My buddy tested it, and it was not 3,4-methylenedioxymethamphetamine. We suspected bath salts. My buddy said screw it and swallowed the whole rock. All of us were intoxicated, so we couldn't drive him to a hospital, but luckily he didn't need it. This guy spent the night talking to a towel that was hanging from a tree, chugged my laundry detergent, and then vomited the laundry detergent into the fire, which smelled like fresh breeze death. He then attempted to hit on me, a known lesbian, and got in a fistfight with my buddy when I turned him down. He passed out in the bus for over 16 hours. By the end of the week, we were very happy to be rid of him. He did say it was the best week he had yet and that he appreciated us for looking after him. It was like trying to babysit a toddler with a death wish. He was fired a few weeks later for inappropriate behavior and harassment of another worker. He was a walking liability. I felt bad for him, but he had damaged his brain so badly through years of antics like this that it was impossible to reason with him or just casually hang out. I hope he is doing better now, but I will never forget the smell of that laundry detergent vomit just cooking in the coals. Story 6. Years ago, I worked at a soft-serve ice cream stand for a while, and we had a 16-year-old girl on what was her first job. She was strangely sheltered and naive and had no idea how to do anything. She was terrified of facing customers, scared of burning herself on the hot fudge dispenser, and couldn't tie her apron. Among the other things she couldn't do, even after repeated training and patient demonstration, were remember which machines were for chocolate, vanilla, or twist. They were labeled. remember which water taps at the sink were for hot and cold, they were labeled, and make change at the register, meaning she didn't know the value of coins. She also had no idea how to peel a banana. She was a dear, sweet soul who really wanted to do well and was excited about her first job. We were kind and patient with her, but she just couldn't do it. Story 7. This is an example of a conversation I have with a manager at my company a couple of times a day. Me, hey, can you please make an effort to get me X by this date? I need it to complete my work. Them, I'm really busy today. Me, that's fine. I just need it by this date. Them, okay, sounds good. Me, just to confirm you will get me X by this date. Them, oh, you need me to get X for you? Me, yes. Can you please get it to me by this date? Them, when do you need it by? Me, this date. Them, okay, no problem. Story 8. I sat next to her for 4 months. She would lock herself out of her computer by repeatedly getting her password wrong several times a week. Every week. Sometimes more than once a day. She had been hired as a temporary personal assistant 6 months before I met her, but I have no idea what she had been doing all that time because she did not seem to know how to do anything. Every day she would ask me things like, how to open someone else's calendar, how to find the expenses system, how to print or scan documents, how to search for flights on the travel system, the names of the London airports, the location of our London office, how to cancel the flight she had booked to the wrong airport, the phone number for the travel desk, how to book a meeting room in our office, the 4-digit phone extension for our reception desk. She would nod and smile constantly as you explained something, but that seemed to be the only thing her head was doing. After the first few days, I started saying, do you want to write this down? She would nod and smile and get a notepad and pen, but just keep nodding and smiling. I started writing her notes. She lost them. I started saying, okay, I am going to email you instructions so you can find them again if you need them. But she would somehow lose or delete them or occasionally send me a blank reply to one of them from days earlier. I printed her a list of useful numbers to stick next to her monitor and phone, but I had to give her a new copy every week or so because she constantly lost it or spilled coffee or lunch on it. I emailed her a copy of the file, but who knows where that ended up. She also ate extremely loudly, with lots of lip smacking and scattering crumbs and debris. She started eating her lunch around 11 a.m. and somehow made it last for at least 2 hours. I am not exaggerating. Her keyboard was always crusted with dried, mashed up lunch, and I had to type things into it frighteningly often. She was a very nice lady who chatted happily about her granddaughter and her husband, but I have no idea how she made it to about the age of 55 because I am pretty sure she was capable of getting badly lost in a moderately sized bouncy castle. I am fairly sure I have met dogs who would have been better personal assistants. Story 9. I worked at a software development company and had a project manager whose only accomplishment was never finishing a project. What she would do was start a project, and when it looked like it was going to fail, she would assign it to a different project manager. Then, if the person she had set up to take the blame for the project failing appeared to be succeeding, she would take over their project at the last minute to claim credit for a successful project. But she was so bad at managing anything that whenever she did this, the project would immediately fail, and the previous competent project manager would have to come in and complete the project. She was fired for not finishing a major project but was rehired a year later. According to my contacts at the company, she still has not finished a project. She also once insisted that we should start storing our data in views instead of tables. To be clear, she meant we should eliminate tables in our databases and use views exclusively. Story 10. Oh man, I have 3 of them, but because they are a bit long, I will only bring up my favorite, Eugene. Eugene was possibly the least capable person I have ever met. He could not follow instructions or remember directions. He could barely use a computer, and we worked in an office job where everything was done via computer. I had to constantly help him with basic tasks like logging in because he found it difficult to remember his username or password. Our usernames were simply our names. For some reason, the boss wanted me to train Eugene on a particular process that involved changing some very basic data in our processing system. All the screens were identified by numbers, which you accessed by typing the number and hitting enter. Keep in mind we all used this system all day, and everyone, including Eugene, accessed many differently numbered screens constantly. I told Eugene we needed to go to screen 77. He nodded and looked at his keyboard, then spent several minutes looking for the 7 key. Once he found it, he hit it triumphantly, then began searching the whole keyboard again for the 7 key, the one he literally just used. Several minutes later, he found it and hit it again, triumphant in his victory, while I tried not to show that I was dying inside because now I had to watch him look for the enter key. I had to walk him through several more steps involving finding other keys on the keyboard. When the process was done, he went to lunch, and I reported to my boss that Eugene was untrainable and related my attempt to him. He was not surprised and decided that maybe Eugene could stay doing whatever he was doing. Eugene was shocked when routine layoffs included him several months later. While we were all sad to no longer have his cheerful attitude around, our work became much more efficient after he left. I hope your next job was better suited for you, Eugene. Story 11. Friend's coworker, not mine. The company hired a person new to our country who apparently lied about his experience to get the job. He said he was handy and had experience with North American vehicles and machines. He usually had a coworker to help guide him, but during an emergency, he was asked to hitch up a company truck to a trailer holding a strapped-down generator by himself. He couldn't figure out the crank mechanism to lower or raise the trailer and panicked. He unstrapped the generator and tried to fit it in the back seat of his own vehicle, a Toyota Corolla. He damaged the upholstery and scratched the paint around the door, but it still wouldn't fit. Then he tried to get it into his trunk by building a ramp out of boards. Again, he damaged his car but managed to get the generator into the trunk. He drove to the emergency situation with his trunk lid slamming down on the generator. His boss was very upset about the time it took and the overall situation. He no longer has the job. Story 12. One coworker did not understand that the refrigerator must be closed. He had the quickest but most unorganized style of work I have ever seen. He also did not want to understand that sauce must be on the bun. Quite often, half of the sauce was on the paper or table because he worked too quickly and too unorganized. Story 13. I used to work with a guy called Peter. He died of alcohol poisoning in his mid-40s, but how he ever got that old I'll never know. I worked with Peter in the earth-moving industry, and he was always given the most menial tasks so he wouldn't cause any damage. One day, one of our scraper operators didn't show up, and I was told to teach Peter how to operate it. My heart sank when I heard those words. You had to realize that the world, according to Peter, was either black or white. There was no in-between. To operate a scraper, you had to put your bucket about 3 inches underground and drag it along, scooping up the dirt until the bucket was full. If done correctly, it left a flat strip of land ready for the next load. But Peter didn't understand the concept of lightly. He just put the bucket into the ground as far as it could go. If the machine couldn't move forward, he lifted the bucket out, the machine would shoot forward, and he'd jam the bucket into the ground again. To him, the bucket was either up or down. After 15 minutes, we gave up, and I worked solo for the day. Unfortunately, the area Peter had messed up took half a day to smooth out, and we got far behind on that job. Next time I ran into Peter, he was the diesel mechanic. He was a good mechanic at a place I was employed. The thing was, he was usually fired on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday for doing something really stupid. The next Monday morning, Peter would call and ask for his job back. And he got it as the boss realized that what Peter had done was annoying at the time but funny in hindsight. This all ended when the lead mechanic drove a $600,000 bulldozer into the shed for quick maintenance. During this, Peter decided to drain the diesel from the bulldozer into his car, which he did very often. But this time he emptied the bulldozer's tank without telling anyone. So the lead mechanic finished and got back into the bulldozer, still thinking it had a quarter tank of diesel. He started it up, and it promptly ran out of diesel. For those who don't know, you cannot run diesel engines dry. If you do, there is a small chance it seizes the engine, in this case exactly what happened. After this, Peter was banned by the company and never got his job back. The lead mechanic was reprimanded, but his embarrassment and humiliation were punishment enough. Years later, I was working in a clay pit, digging out clay to make bricks, and there was Peter on the water truck. His job was simple: drive around and spray water everywhere so dust wasn't created. It was the easiest job on the site. Things went well, and even I thought he couldn't screw it up. One day, I was waiting to be loaded and watched Peter drive down a steep hill. Every other time he had gone up the hill, so the water was always behind him. Peter thought it was a bit scary, so he slowed down, but he still had the water sprayer going full blast. I watched in horror as the water started to run down the track. It was all clay, past him. I told Peter to turn the water sprayer off, but he refused, saying he was concentrating on getting down the hill. The inevitable happened. The whole track was covered in water, and the truck lost traction and started to slide forward on the wet clay. This was one of the only times in my life when I physically couldn't breathe as I watched. At the bottom of the hill was a large dam, and I was so certain he was going in that I put my handbrake on and started to get out of my machine to jump into the dam and rescue him. Peter couldn't keep the truck straight and had no control by then. The truck slid forward at speed. By the time he got to the bottom, the truck was sideways, and when it hit the bottom, it slid more. When the truck stopped, Peter was looking up at the steep hill he had just come down from. His wheel marks showed he missed going into the dam by about a meter. I finally started to breathe. To Peter, it was just another day. Story 14. Had a man who got his job through family connections. He regularly took 45-minute bathroom breaks, would fall asleep in his car, and forget to set an alarm, so we had to go out and get him to come to work. He would find tools and pretend he had no idea they belonged to someone else. My name was engraved on them. When he finished the task he was assigned, he would put his hands in his pockets and wander around the shop talking to people until someone noticed he was not working. He was the first person I was genuinely happy to see laid off. Story 15. I had an early boss like that. When I left, in the exit interview, I said, "Charlie, you were without exaggeration the dumbest person I have ever met." He replied with genuine feeling, "It was great working with you too." I don't think he knew what exaggeration meant. Story 16. The person they hired at my old pizza place job caused several safety issues. He burned one of the supervisors because he used the pizza knife to fish something out of the deep fryer and did not inform anyone it was burning hot. I had to take a knife away from him one day because he was trying to cut something off the edge of the table and into his hand. A couple of weeks later, he called our manager to take him to the emergency room because he had sliced his hand open attempting to prune his bushes with a steak knife. He was careless enough to be a danger to himself and those around him, yet nobody wanted to fire him because they felt bad for his children. Story 17. I worked with a man who was somewhat competent at his job but struggled with real-life situations. One day, he called in on his day off around 4 p.m., asking for help driving from Baltimore to New York City because he had tickets to take his wife to a Broadway show that evening. We were a little confused about why he needed help since the directions are simple. Take Interstate 95 north and stay on it until you see signs for New York City. This was in the era of smartphones and GPS, so it was hard to understand why he was having trouble. When we asked where he was, he responded, "West Virginia." He had somehow managed to set his GPS to direct him due west to get from Baltimore to New York City. After some investigation, we found out that he had set his GPS to highways only and no tolls. His GPS was trying to take him on a 15-hour, over 1,000-mile trip from Baltimore to New York City without leaving a highway or paying tolls. Here is the real kicker. The actual route from Baltimore to New York City without paying tolls does not go through West Virginia. It goes north into central Pennsylvania, then east to New York City. It's only about a 5-hour drive. The toll route is around 3.5 to 4 hours, depending on traffic. Needless to say, they did not make their 6 p.m. show. He later got divorced after discovering that his wife had been using their shared bank account to pay for hotel rooms where she allowed multiple men to have group encounters several times a week. Apparently, this had been going on for years before he finally figured it all out. She had spent tens of thousands of dollars doing this. Story 18. I had an employee who was constantly late. I tried everything to help him before having to write him up. After the write-up, he said he did not understand and mentioned that when he hangs out with his friends, most people show up 45 minutes late. He said it is kind of your fault if you show up at the set time. Story 19. Yes. I had a job as a draftee in a construction company. The construction job supervisor often had trouble remembering details about the project. I frequently had to remind him that certain equipment needed to be installed. Also, the company owner was constantly yelling at him because he forgot things, such as informing him about new equipment that needed to be acquired or purchased. One time, I thought they were going to start fighting. He was useless, but he was the job administrator's son, so that was that. Story 20. Plenty. Had one person complain that I made him pick up the heavy side of a spinet piano. Another asked me if my Google Maps was live. I told him, yes. I have control of $1 billion satellite with my free app. Someone else said, why don't you just use Wi-Fi? When I was complaining about my internet price rising, I had to explain where the Wi-Fi was coming from. Story 21. Construction. One man just sat and stared into nothing for 30 minutes. When he did work, it all had to be redone. He is a journeyman who cannot do anything. I think he just goes to large jobs where he can blend in and not get noticed. Story 22. I used to work with a man we'll call Frank. He was friendly and earnest but completely clueless. Most of the time when you were speaking to him, you just knew he had no idea what the conversation was about. The one thing I remember most is occasionally working busy promotional giveaways with him. Hundreds of people would show up to these events, so it was very fast-paced. You needed to constantly be unpacking boxes of whatever we were giving away. Frank was not fast at this, so we put him on box-cutting duty. He could not figure out how to break up a cardboard box. They were normal boxes, he had box cutters, and we demonstrated how to do it when it was clear he wasn't getting it done. He acted like we were asking him to solve advanced math puzzles. He never figured it out and was quickly banned from box-cutting duties. To this day, I can't break up a box without thinking of Frank. Story 23. Small potatoes compared to some of these stories, but I once worked with a woman who called in sick because she lost her phone and did not know how to get to the office without the global positioning system. She had worked for the company for 6 months. Story 24. I worked in the bar once and received an order for 2 coffees with soy milk. At the time, we did not have any soy milk, so I personally went to the table and informed the ladies that we did not have soy milk. I offered alternatives, but they said they would rather not have any. I apologized and returned to the bar to inform my manager that we needed to refund them for the coffees. 15 minutes later, the waiter handling that section came to me and said they were still waiting for their coffees. I explained what had happened, but he could not seem to process it and said, "They are waiting on their coffees, man. They are in a rush." We went back and forth until my manager intervened in a much louder tone, saying, he spoke to them personally, and they said they did not want it anymore. Somehow, the waiter finally understood and left. I was very upset at this point. Story 25. Yes, they were impossible to train, talk to, or deal with. I had to tolerate them. It was my job to fire them after they had been with the company for many years. They should not have lasted that long, but they had been close friends with one of the founder's sons in college. I had no ties to anyone, so that task fell to me. Others did not want to be blamed for giving this person the boot, so they let the new employee do it. The person was insufferable to the very end. Being unintelligent, you can usually work around or deal with, but being lazy, deliberately and willfully ignorant, and arrogant, that is a reason to let them go. Do not even try to tolerate that behavior. Story 26. I had one boss who believed every conspiracy theory he had probably ever heard. He was the most insufferable person I have ever met. I should have run when I was asked in the interview what my political leaning was. This is illegal in the United States. At another job, 2 coworkers made mistakes they should not have been making after 3 months, and they were there for over a year. I was constantly correcting their work. I asked to be moved because one was my partner, and I could not stand him after a month. The other was fired for making a major mistake while I was in the bathroom. He tried blaming me, but management did not believe him, as they actually paid attention. Story 27. Yes. I worked at a fast food restaurant, so the concept was not that difficult. He was terrible at it and could not even clean the dining room properly. He was reprimanded multiple times because he would not sweep under the tables. Whenever someone told him what sauce they wanted with the chicken strip basket, he would hit the no-dip button. He would pester people about their religion, and when they gave him an answer other than devout Christian, he would try to debate. He was given specific step-by-step instructions on how to make tea but skipped half the steps, which led to boiling hot water spraying everywhere. He told customers that the owner was a bad person, although he had never met the owner. He tried to flirt with a couple of women there, including a manager, who were taken and not interested. One of the women was married to one of the cooks, and he once went on a speech to the husband about how lucky he was to have her and how awesome she was. One day, he said he was hungry but did not have any money to buy food. The cooks had just made an extra chili cheese dog. He went on a speech about how Jesus looks out for his own. One time he got food and said, "Okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom and eat this." I said, "You know there's a prep table in the back where we can eat, right?" He said, "What? Am I not allowed to eat my food in the bathroom?" I said, "Well, I am not saying you cannot, just that most people do not." On his last day, he lasted 2 weeks. By the way, he had a college class or something he had to leave early for. He did not tell any of the managers, just clocked out and left. One of the managers asked him to make some more tea, and he said, "I am already clocked out." She tried to ask him why he had already clocked out, but he was already out the door. Story 28. No, but one guy I worked with in software engineering was extremely smart. Too smart for his own good. Every problem he was tasked with, he molded into something he could write a domain-specific language for. It took at least 8 senior engineer hours to convince him he didn't need a database upgrade, whether MySQL or Amazon Aurora, I forget which, but he could just write a nested query instead. I was his line manager. The amount of energy required to manage that guy was insane. He was also extremely abrasive to anyone he perceived to be lower on the corporate or skill ladder than him. It was insane. He left the company, then wanted to come back after a year. The architect was in favor but let his future line manager decide. The line manager told him, "Yeah, you can come back, but many people have said they don't want to work with you, so you're going to have to keep your distance." And that was that. As far as I know, he never followed up. We had a guy in the quality assurance department and his wife was in my squad. On the daily, the wife said something failed overnight, and the guy said, "It worked yesterday, but your husband broke it." Story 29. One of my coworkers must have grown up in a remote homestead because she did not understand basic technology, and I was often asked to help her troubleshoot. Here's a sample of what she asked me every other day. They deleted my email. She forgot her password and did not write it down. I can't download Google. Chrome is already installed, and the icon is on her desktop. Google Drive isn't opening. She was clicking on a JPEG of the Google Drive logo in Google Images, not the actual link. I'm still waiting on this Zoom call. She missed a virtual doctor's appointment because she thought Zoom was a phone call and that the doctor would call her cell phone, not a video call where she had to join herself. My computer is broken. She did not charge it. If you are reading this and thinking, that would make sense if she was in her 80s. No, she is in her 30s. Despite it being annoying to help her so often, she always had a good attitude and was appreciative. Story 30. I once supervised a very incompetent employee. My 2 favorites. I asked him to make an inventory of some of our equipment, explaining the task and how to find the serial number. When I checked in, he had been inputting basically anything from the labels that looked like a number, such as 2000 milliamp hours 100 volts/5 volts, or 100 to 240 volts approximately 50 to 60 hertz, or conformate European Federal Communications Commission Model E01, for the serial number and things like Dell, or current rating, or warning sensitive electronics, for the model. I asked him to take something to shipping to be sent out. I suppose I wasn't specific enough and he just left it outside. He left our building, walked around to the back, and left the box on the ground outside the shipping and receiving bay. It was run over by a truck. Story 31. My immediate supervisor and her boss, our division director, loved our intern Tracy because she never questioned anything they said. Even though Tracy was completely incompetent, they hired her as a regular employee over the objections of everyone who had worked with her. After several mishaps, We believed Tracy would be fired after she accidentally deleted all of the data from a critical database we had been ordered to share with her. Our bosses considered it an honest mistake and essentially blamed us for not training her better. Fortunately, my colleague had anticipated this scenario and only gave Tracy a dummy copy of the database rather than access to our production database, so we did not lose anything. Later, at an important off-site meeting with key external stakeholders, our director spoke and made multiple references to an essential briefing document that she had asked Tracy to photocopy and circulate to the attendees by mail as required pre-reading for the meeting. At some point, one stakeholder interrupted our director and asked if she had an extra copy of the document because the copy he had received included only the odd-numbered pages. As our director checked for a spare copy, several other attendees reported the same problem. It turned out that Tracy had treated the original two-sided document as a one-sided document when making copies for everyone. Our director was furious about being embarrassed in front of her peers and demanded an explanation from Tracy upon returning to the office. Tracy's last words were, "You didn't tell me it was two-sided." Story 32. Funny enough, I also had a boss named Gary. I work in a hotel, and this year, back in February, we experienced many people quitting in the kitchen and walking out. For the past few months, there have only been random hires here and there. Then Gary came. Gary is a tall man who had the nerve to have executive chef on his uniform. He said he has kids, but I worry about what he feeds them. I remember him making Spanish rice that looked like creme brulee. You had to smash it with a spoon, and the black beans looked like charcoal. He would do one thing and then hide in his office for many hours, while food and ingredients were left out in the open, attracting fruit flies. I recall one day when we were serving sandwiches at a banquet lunch. There was green mold on the bread, yet Gary did not think to check the food. Thankfully, he is gone now. I will never forget how awful his Spanish rice looked. Story 33. I've had that conversation with coworkers. How does someone become competent enough to work at a grocery store and not starve? Story 34. I worked at a small firm where the human resources director, the head of human resources for the entire company, had absolutely no clue how to use Microsoft Word beyond using his computer like a typewriter. This was not long ago. He once had the paragraph markers button turned on and spent about an hour trying to delete all the spacing and paragraph symbols that appear when that button is activated. He would take 1.5-hour lunches every day because he liked to walk around Target. The chief executive officer apparently called him out on it, and the human resources director did not know he was only allowed to take an hour, even though, being the head of human resources, he had supposedly written the employee handbook. He once thought he had lost his wedding ring in a trash can outside a Five Guys restaurant and dumped all the trash everywhere trying to find it. To my recollection, he had not actually lost it. He had just forgotten he was wearing it that day. I have other stories, but you get the picture. Story 35. This person was clueless. I am a veterinarian now. Before veterinary school, I was hesitant to apply because I was scared of rejection and imposter syndrome. Then I worked with a woman who did not perform full physical examinations and missed easy diagnoses like ear infections. She also behaved unprofessionally around several employees and talked negatively about our employer. Anyway, I said if she can have a successful career, so can I. Story 36. You can find many of these stories on the Reddit page Stories About Kevin. Story 37. We have some pumping units on skids that weigh about 18,000 pounds each. A young engineer convinced management that we should mount these on extra trailers we have at another location. The trailers have a gross weight of 14,000 pounds, including 4,000 pounds for the trailer itself. It took hours to convince them that this was a very bad idea. For context, management is about the age of my youngest child, and the engineer is about the age of my grandchildren. Story 38. When I went through the basic non-commissioned officer course while in the Army, I met a sergeant who was a motor transport operator. This was in Germany, so part of the course was conducted via an instructor in the United States who taught us through a webcam. The supervisor in the class would block the camera and have me pass my answers to this person. Otherwise, he probably would not have passed the course. This was during the height of the Iraq War, so the Army was taking everyone it could get its hands on. Story 39. I worked with a woman in Australia who was from Hong Kong. It was my first job as a manager, and she was initially working under me. She was the most incompetent person I have ever met. All she had to do was make a few phone calls each day to clients, check some very basic details, write them in a spreadsheet, and show me at the end of the day. The number of days that passed where she called no one and wrote nothing was incredible. I talked to her in depth about it and said, "Okay, pick up the phone now and make a call. If you have trouble, I will take over." She would say, "Okay," then turn to her computer. After a few seconds of me watching her, she would glance at me out of the corner of her eye and then turn back. I would say, "Pick up the phone and call," and she would pick it up but just sit there. It was baffling. I had to let her go after a few months of bureaucratic delays. She was embarrassingly poor as an employee, and no, I did not hire her. Story 40. I think every person I work with, myself included, has had at least one moment of complete stupidity. Like the time I couldn't hear someone properly on the phone, so I closed my eyes while driving. Or the systems expert who suggested the equivalent of turning off the car's engine to make it quieter while driving. Or the director who followed a staff member because they thought they saw them fail to stop fully at a stop sign. Or our lead information technology specialist who rearranged a production directory on a Friday, thinking it would have no impact. Or the visiting specialist who melted holes in critical equipment because he didn't understand his own safety system. Or the senior staff member who quit rather than take sensitivity training for being difficult. Story 41. I had a few. One of them I somewhat affectionately referred to as Fat Batman. Fat Batman was a somewhat overweight man who would literally sneak up on you when you were just chatting with coworkers, and just as easily disappear when you looked away for a second. Fat Batman always ate the exact same food every day, in very large portions, and when it was his time for lunch he would just get up and leave, not even saying a word to anyone. Same with when he was done eating. He would just get up and leave even if we were at the table with him. Fat Batman had the habit of going around and peeking over people's shoulders to read their computer monitors, sometimes even reading their personal messages. But most importantly, Fat Batman was unbelievably bad at his job. How bad? He interviewed for the company and got rejected, only managing to get in through a temporary agency. One time, a coworker reviewed his work and made some notes of things he needed to fix. 3 days went by. She went to check, and he simply ignored everything she told him. She approached him, asked about it, and he just stared blankly until she felt uncomfortable and left. I once had to go in and make a change on something he had done based on a client request. It took me forever because he did it in the most incompetent way possible. He frequently hogged work, but as soon as he was done with it, he could not care less. Any feedback or issues that needed resolving were someone else's problem. He was all about doing the next thing. Also, he was always on the phone and had the annoying habit of answering it very loudly, to the point where everyone not only heard it but laughed. Unsurprisingly, he was let go after not that long. Story 42. Unfortunately, I work with more than one person who does not believe in vaccinations. They refused to get the COVID-19 vaccine, and one of them refused to get the free influenza vaccine our company was offering because they said, "You do not know what the government is putting in you." A more specific example. I was upgrading my car, and the trade-in value was very low. The car was a rust heap, to be fair. I ended up getting a better deal by selling it for scrap metal. When I mentioned that to my coworker, she looked at me seriously and asked what I needed scrap metal for and what I was planning to do with it. Story 43. I worked with a man who thought carbon copy in emails meant cancel communication. Every time the manager added someone to the thread, he stopped replying entirely. He once asked if he could microwave a metal spoon because it was not sharp like a knife. He was a nice man, but working with him felt like babysitting a confused dog. Story 44. We had an accountant who called me asking why our credit cards were not batching at night. I looked, and they were batching at midnight, maybe a few minutes after, but it was an automated system doing what it was supposed to do. She said no, credit cards processed on Monday were not batching until Tuesday. I said yes because they batch at midnight. She responded that it should be midnight on Monday. I jokingly said, "You cannot batch what has not happened yet." She did not like that. I explained that midnight is a new day. At some point, I asked if there was someone else in her department who could explain how time works because I am busy, and I hung up. This went back and forth for about 30 minutes before I decided to end the call because I will not suffer fools at work. Story 45. The subject of homeless people in California came up. My coworker said, "I don't get it. Why don't they just move?" I asked, "If they just move, do you think they won't be homeless?" She said, "Yeah, I guess she should call Governor Newsom. She has this problem solved." Story 46. I worked in the plumbing and heating field with a guy who, after 1 year, asked, "What does this pump do?" It was a valve, not a pump. He also spent an entire paycheck on Four Loko. Story 47. Only until I found out they were a nepotism hire. Usually they are harmless clowns, but every once in a while one is nasty. Story 48. I used to work at a youth center that operated on a very small budget. I was the only paid employee, and management otherwise relied on whatever volunteer labor they could find. They got an America Volunteers member to run the computer center for the kids, a mismatched collection of old computers. The first day I met her, I knew we were in trouble. She was messing with the computers in the morning before the students arrived, and she asked me if she should download the internet or if another option was better. I almost didn't hear her because I was focused on the screen full of pop-up ads for adult products and singles in her area on the computer she was using to check her email. We were stuck with her for an entire year. During that time, every computer continuously got viruses, none of which could be replaced as she damaged them one by one. Thankfully, she was absent a lot. She refused to show up whenever it rained because she was concerned about having an accident during her commute. She lived across the hallway, and her commute consisted of 3 steps across the carpeted hallway indoors. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.